The day of the exhibition opening arrived warm and clear. I got to the gallery early to make sure everything was perfect. The space looked incredible, Diana's vision brought to life. But the person whose vision it was might not make it to see it. I'd visited Diana that morning at her hospice room. She was barely conscious, the medication keeping her comfortable, but also keeping her away from us. Sophie was there, holding Diana's hand, talking softly to her about the exhibition. Diana's eyes flickered open briefly when I arrived. "Today," she whispered. "Today," I confirmed. "Everything's ready." "It's beautiful, Diana, you did it." She squeezed my hand weakly. "Tell them," she started but didn't finish. I leaned closer. "Tell them what?" "Tell them to be brave," she finally managed. "Tell them life is short. Tell them to really see each other." "I will," I promised. "I'll tell them." Those were the last words Diana said to me. She slipped back into sleep, her breathing shallow but peaceful. Sophie and I sat with her for a while longer. Then Sophie insisted I go to the gallery. "She'd want you there," Sophie said. "She'd want someone who understands to guide people through it." The gallery filled quickly that evening. Art critics, journalists, curious members of the public, other artists. All of them walking through the rooms, reading the descriptions, watching the video interviews. Some people were moved. Others were uncomfortable. A few were openly critical, calling the project manipulative or ethically questionable. I wandered through the crowd, listening to conversations. One woman said, "I don't know if I'm inspired or disturbed." A man argued with his friend about whether art could justify what Diana had done. A young artist sat in front of my video interview, crying quietly. At 7 o'clock, I stepped to the center of the gallery as planned. People gathered around. The room fell quiet. I was supposed to give a brief speech explaining Diana's vision. But standing there looking at all those faces, I found myself deviating from what I'd prepared. "Diana couldn't be here tonight," I began. "She's dying. Right now, as we stand here, she's in hospice, probably hours or days from the end. She wanted me to explain her project to you, but I'm not going to do that, because explaining would miss the point." People shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd expected. What Diana did to me and 4 other people was strange. It was uncomfortable. It violated normal social rules. And it was also the most honest, brave human thing anyone has ever done for me. She saw me when I felt invisible. She chose me when I felt... Saturday came faster than I expected. I barely slept Friday night, running through possible conversations in my head. What would I say to her? What would she say to me? Would it be awkward? Would I finally get answers to the questions that had been spinning through my mind for the past week? The address she'd given me led to an old building in the arts district, the kind of place where painters and sculptors rent cheap studios. I climbed 3 flights of narrow stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. Her door was at the end of the hall, painted bright red. Before I could second-guess myself, I knocked. Diana opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been waiting right there. In daylight, in her own space, she looked different than she had in the gallery. Smaller somehow, more fragile. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a soft sweater. Her hair was down this time, falling around her shoulders. But her eyes were the same. That intense, present way of looking at someone like they're the only person in the world. "You came," she said simply. "I'm glad." Her studio was exactly what you'd expect from an artist, but more personal than I'd imagined. Canvases leaned against walls. Photographs were pinned everywhere. But there were also pill bottles on the windowsill. Medical papers on the desk. A hospital bracelet tucked half under some sketches. Reminders that this wasn't just an artist's workspace. It was the room of someone living with an expiration date. We sat at a worn wooden table near the window. The afternoon light came through in dusty beams. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Diana smiled, that same small smile from the gallery, and said, "I imagine you have questions." "So many," I admitted. "I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere," she said. "I have time." "Well," she paused, and there was dark humor in her voice. "I have some time." So I asked her everything. Why me specifically? How did she choose? What did she hope to accomplish? Wasn't she worried about consequences? What if someone had called the police? What if someone had reacted violently? Diana answered each question thoughtfully. She'd been planning this project for months, she explained. After her diagnosis, after the initial shock and anger and grief, she'd found clarity. She knew what her final artistic statement needed to be. Something about authentic human connection in a world that had forgotten how to truly connect. I chose people who seemed kind, she said, who seemed present in their own lives. Because what I was offering required someone who could be present with me in return. Someone who wouldn't just react but who would feel, who would understand eventually what I was trying to say. She talked about the other people she'd chosen. The nurse who'd wept after Diana left and then sent flowers to Diana's home a week later with a note that said, "Thank you for reminding me why I do this job." The bus driver who'd taken a week off to think about his life and came back with a new gentleness in how he treated passengers. The librarian who'd started a book club about vulnerability and truth in literature. Each person was changed by it, Diana said, just like I was changed by them. That's what I wanted, real exchange. Not taking, not giving, but sharing. I asked her about consent again because it was still the thing I struggled with most. How could what she did be okay when she hadn't asked permission first? Diana leaned back in her chair, considering. "I've thought about this more than anything else," she said. "And here's what I believe. There are different kinds of consent. Legal consent, yes, but also emotional consent, spiritual consent. The consent that happens when two people recognize each other as humans who need connection." She wasn't dismissing the importance of consent, she explained. She'd thought carefully about what she was doing. She'd never touched anyone inappropriately. She'd never put anyone in danger. She'd chosen public or semi-public spaces where people could leave if they wanted. The kiss was brief, gentle, and came at the end. A closing gesture, not a taking. "But here's the thing," Diana continued. "If I'd walked up and asked, 'May I show you my body and kiss you as an art piece about vulnerability?' what would you have said?" "I would have said no," I admitted, "exactly. Because your rational mind would have protected you from the unknown, from the uncomfortable, from the possibility of meaning. Sometimes the most profound experiences can't be negotiated in advance. They have to simply happen. And then afterward we decide what they meant." We talked for hours that afternoon. Diana told me about her life before cancer. She'd been married once, briefly, in her 20s. It hadn't worked out. She'd traveled extensively, creating art in different countries. She'd had successes and failures, moments of recognition and long periods of obscurity. She'd lived fully, she said, but always at a distance, always observing life through the lens of her art rather than simply living it. The diagnosis changed that, she said. Suddenly I wasn't an observer anymore. I was a participant in the most universal human experience, dying. And I realized I'd been doing it wrong. Not the art, the living. I'd spent so much time analyzing human connection that I'd forgotten to actually connect. That's when she'd conceived of her final project. 5 moments of pure connection. No analysis during the moment. No artistic distance. Just human to human, authentic and present. She would document it afterward, yes. She would create an exhibition about it. But in the moments themselves, she would just be Diana. Dying, afraid, but choosing to be fully alive one last time with each stranger she chose. "What about your family?" I asked. "Your friends? Don't you want to spend this time with them?" Diana smiled sadly. "I do, and I am. But that's different. They know me. They love me. There's no risk in being vulnerable with people who already accept you. I wanted to be vulnerable with strangers, to trust people who had no reason to care about me, to see if connection could happen without history, without context, just presence." As we talked, I found myself sharing things I hadn't expected to. I told her about my own life, how I'd been playing it safe for years, how I'd had relationships that never quite deepened because I was afraid of being truly known, how I curated art about vulnerability but never practiced it myself, how her action, as strange and shocking as it was, had cracked something open in me. "I've been going through life half asleep," I said. "And you woke me up. I'm not sure if I should thank you or be angry at you for that." "Both," Diana said. "Feel both." That's honest. She asked if I'd participate in her exhibition. She wanted to interview each of the 5 people, record their experiences, show how one moment of vulnerability rippled outward. I hesitated, feeling exposed at the thought of my experience being public. But then I realized that was the point, wasn't it? To be willing to be seen, to stop hiding. "Okay," I said. "I'll do it." Diana's face lit up with genuine joy. "Thank you, really. This project means everything to me. It's my last chance to say something true about being human, and I can't do it without you." Before I left that day, Diana showed me her journals, thick notebooks filled with observations about each person she'd chosen. About me, she'd written pages, details I didn't know she'd noticed. The way I always straightened the corner of papers before reading them. How I hummed quietly when I was concentrating. The fact that I stayed late every Thursday not because I had to, but because I liked the quiet of the empty gallery. You see people, she'd written about me, but you don't let people see you. There's a sadness in that, a loneliness. I wonder if he knows. Reading that made my throat tight, because she was right. I did feel lonely, even surrounded by art and visitors and the bustle of gallery life. I felt unseen, and somehow in those 5 minutes in the gallery, Diana had seen me more clearly than people I'd known for years. We made plans to meet again. Not for the interview yet, that would come later. Just to talk, to continue this unexpected friendship that had started in the strangest way possible. As I left her studio that evening, Diana hugged me. A real hug, warm and human, nothing artistic or performative about it. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for being brave enough to try to understand." Walking home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The city looked different somehow, more vivid. I noticed people in ways I hadn't before. The couple holding hands at the crosswalk. The old man feeding pigeons in the park. The teenager crying on a bench while talking on her phone. All of us just trying to connect. All of us mostly failing. All of us desperately hoping to be seen. Over the next few weeks, Diana and I met regularly, sometimes at her studio, sometimes at quiet cafes, once in the park near her apartment. We talked about everything: art and death, fear and courage, the strange ways humans try to find meaning in their brief time alive. I learned that Diana's cancer had progressed faster than expected. She was in pain more often now, though she tried to hide it. There were days when she'd cancel our meetings because she couldn't get out of bed. But when we did meet, she was fully present, engaged, curious about my life as much as she shared her own. She told me about the other encounters in detail. The nurse, whose name was Patricia, had been in her 40s, burnt out from years of healthcare work. Diana had gone to the hospital for a routine scan and noticed how Patricia moved through the ward, efficient but kind, maintaining her humanity despite the exhaustion. One evening, Diana waited until Patricia's shift ended and approached her in the parking garage. She cried, Diana told me, immediately, before I even did anything. Like she'd been holding it in for so long that just someone paying attention to her broke the dam. After, she told me it was the first time in years anyone had made her feel seen as a person, not just a nurse. The bus driver, Tony, had been different. Quiet, stoic. Diana's gesture had confused him at first, even angered him. But he'd sat with it, thought about it, and eventually realized what Diana was offering. Recognition of his daily kindness, acknowledgement that he mattered. "He wrote me a letter," Diana said, showing me. In careful handwriting, Tony had written, "I never thought what I did mattered much. Drive the route, pick people up, drop them off. But you saw something in me worth noticing. That means more than I can say." The librarian, whose name I learned was Beth, had been the most immediately understanding. She'd worked with books about human nature all her life. She'd read about intimacy and vulnerability and connection. When Diana approached her, Beth had simply whispered, "I understand," and stood there witnessing Diana with complete acceptance. "Beth gets it on an intellectual level," Diana explained. "But I wanted her to feel it. There's a difference between reading about vulnerability and experiencing it." I think I gave her that. As Diana shared these stories, I realized something. Her project wasn't really about her at all. It was about us, the 5 strangers she'd chosen. She was giving us permission to live differently, to be braver, to connect more authentically. Her diagnosis had freed her from caring what people thought. And through these encounters, she was trying to pass that freedom on to others. I met Diana's best friend, Sophie, during one of our meetings. Sophie was a painter, had known Diana for 20 years. She was the one who'd been with Diana through the diagnosis, the treatments, the decision to stop treatment and focus on art instead. "She's always been like this," Sophie told me when Diana stepped away to take a phone call from her doctor. "Pushing boundaries, making people uncomfortable. But it comes from love, you know? She believes people are capable of more connection, more truth, more life than they let themselves experience. This project is her love letter to humanity. Sophie also told me that my encounter had affected Diana more than the others. She talks about you differently, Sophie said. The others were beautiful, successful moments. But you? Something about your reaction, the way you responded, it touched something in her. I think she sees a kindred spirit in you. This surprised me. I'd thought of Diana as so much braver than me, so much more alive. But maybe Sophie was right. Maybe Diana saw in me what I'd been afraid to acknowledge in myself. A desire for deeper connection, a readiness to live more authentically, hidden under layers of caution and routine. The exhibition was scheduled for 2 months after our first meeting. Diana was working on it constantly, despite her worsening health. She conducted video interviews with each of the 5 of us, asking about our experience, our feelings, what had changed for us since that moment. My interview was the hardest thing I'd ever done, sitting in front of a camera, being completely honest about my loneliness, my fear of intimacy, my safe little life. It felt like being stripped bare. But Diana was there behind the camera, encouraging me with her eyes. Tell the truth, she kept saying gently. That's all this is. Just truth. I told the truth about how her action had shocked me, about how I'd felt violated at first, then confused, then strangely honored, about how knowing her had changed me, about how I was starting to live differently, taking risks, having difficult conversations, letting people closer than I'd allowed in years. She saved me, I said to the camera, surprising myself with the words, not in some dramatic way, but in a real way. She showed me I was half alive, and she made me want to be fully alive before it's too late. Diana had to stop recording because she was crying. We both were. Sophie, who was helping with the technical aspects, was too. It was one of those moments where truth just fills a room and everyone feels it. As Diana's health declined, our friendship deepened. I helped her prepare the exhibition. I sat with her during difficult days. I brought her soup when she was too tired to cook. I read to her when the medication made it hard for her to focus on words. I just sat beside her in silence when that was what she needed. Other people from her life were there too. Sophie, of course, and Diana's sister who flew in from across the country, and a few other artists who'd known Diana for decades. But I was part of her inner circle now. This stranger she'd chosen, who'd become family through the strangest of circumstances. One afternoon, about 3 weeks before the exhibition, Diana asked me something unexpected. Do you regret it? That night, knowing everything you know now, do you wish I hadn't chosen you? I thought about it carefully. The honest answer was complicated. Sometimes, I said. When things are hard, when I'm feeling things I used to avoid feeling, yeah, sometimes I wish I could go back to being comfortably numb. But mostly? No, I don't regret it. You gave me something precious. You gave me myself back, Diana smiled. Good, because I don't regret it either. Choosing you was one of the best decisions I've made. You got it. You really got it. And watching you come alive these past weeks, that's been as meaningful to me as the original moment. We talked about death that day. Diana wasn't afraid of it anymore, she said. I've been dying since the diagnosis. You get used to it. What scared me was dying without having really lived, without having made something true, without having connected. But I've done that now. So I'm ready whenever it comes. I wasn't ready. I wanted more time with her. More conversations. More afternoons in her studio. More of her wisdom about how to live authentically. But death doesn't care what we want. It comes when it comes. The exhibition was nearly ready. Diana had created something beautiful. A series of rooms, each dedicated to one of the 5 encounters. Video interviews played on screens. Photographs documented the locations. Her journals were displayed behind glass, showing her thought process. And in the center of each room was an empty space, representing the moment itself, the thing that couldn't be captured or explained, only experienced. Some things can't be documented, Diana told me as we walked through the gallery during setup. The moment itself belongs only to the 2 people who shared it. Everything else is just trying to explain the unexplainable. But maybe that's valuable too. Maybe trying to explain is its own form of art. The opening was scheduled for a Thursday, the same day of the week as our original encounter. Diana had planned every detail, but as the date approached, we all knew she might not be strong enough to attend. The cancer was in her bones now, her liver. She was in hospice care, managing pain, sleeping most of the day. If I can't be there, she told me 3 days before the opening, her voice weak. Will you speak for me? Tell them what this was about? Help them understand? I will, I promised. But you'll be there. You have to be. She smiled at my optimism, but we both knew the truth. Time was running out. A dying stranger walked into my life for 5 minutes and taught me more about living than I'd learned in 30 years, without saying a single word. It was a Thursday evening, and I was doing what I'd been doing for the past 3 months, working late at the downtown art gallery. The place was mine to look after while my boss was traveling, and honestly, I didn't mind the quiet. There's something peaceful about an empty gallery at night. Just you, the art on the walls, and the soft hum of the track lighting overhead. I was sitting at the front desk going through photographs for an upcoming exhibition. We were planning something about vulnerability in modern art, and I had hundreds of submissions to review. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. Outside, the city was winding down. Cars passed by less frequently. The streetlights had that orange glow that makes everything look like an old film. That's when I heard the door chime. I looked up, expecting to see someone who'd missed our closing time. Maybe they wanted to ask about gallery hours or directions to somewhere else. But the woman who walked in wasn't looking around confused. She knew exactly where she was going. She was walking straight toward me. She wore a long coat, the kind you'd wear on a cold day even though it was warm outside. Her hair was pulled back and her face had this calm expression that I can't quite describe. Not happy, not sad, just certain. Like she'd made a decision about something important and nothing was going to change her mind. I stood up from my chair. Can I help you? We're actually closed for the evening. She didn't answer. She just kept walking until she was standing right in front of me. Close. Closer than strangers usually stand. I could smell her perfume, something floral but subtle. My heart started beating faster. Not from fear exactly, but from the strangeness of it all. Something about this moment felt big, though I didn't understand why. The silence between us stretched out. It felt like minutes, though it was probably only seconds. She was looking right into my eyes, not in an angry way or a flirty way. It was more like she was looking for something, or maybe trying to tell me something without words. Then she started unbuttoning her coat. My mind went blank. I didn't know what to do, what to say. Should I step back? Should I ask her to stop? But there was something about the way she moved, so deliberate, so purposeful, that made me stay still. This wasn't what it might seem like. I could feel that somehow. She let the coat fall to the floor. Underneath, she wore a simple dress. And then, with that same calm certainty, she removed that too. But here's what I need you to understand. This wasn't about attraction or anything like that. When I saw her standing there, what I saw was a human being choosing to be completely honest. Her body told stories. There were scars from surgeries. Marks from a life fully lived. Things most people spend their whole lives hiding. She was showing me truth. Raw, unfiltered, vulnerable truth. Before my brain could process what was happening, before I could form a single word, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't rough or passionate. It wasn't hesitant either. It was like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence, a period, a completion of something. Then she stepped back, got dressed with the same quiet efficiency, picked up her coat, and walked toward the door. I finally found my voice. Wait, I called out. Who are you? She paused at the door and looked back at me. For the first time, I saw her smile. Just a little. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night like she'd never been there at all. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. My legs felt weak, so I sat down on the floor right where I'd been standing. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, I want to be clear about that. From something else. From the weight of what had just happened, whatever it was. I touched my lips, almost checking to make sure it had been real. The gallery was silent again, but it felt different now. Like the air itself had changed. I looked at the door, half expecting her to come back and explain. To tell me this was a prank or a mistake or something that made sense. But the door stayed closed. Eventually, I got up and walked around the gallery almost in a daze. I checked the security cameras, hoping to get a better look at her, maybe catch her face clearly or see if she'd left anything behind. But she'd positioned herself perfectly. Every angle showed me from behind, or her coat covering everything, or just the back of her head. It was like she knew exactly where the cameras were. I found myself thinking about every moment of the encounter, replaying it in my mind. The way she'd walked. The certainty in her eyes. The scars on her body, the gentleness of that kiss. None of it made sense, yet all of it felt intentional, planned, meaningful. I tried to work after that, but I couldn't focus. The photographs I'd been reviewing all blurred together. My mind kept returning to her. Who was she? Why had she chosen me? What was she trying to say? Because it was clear she was trying to say something. This wasn't random. It couldn't be. Around midnight I gave up and went home. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights sweep across the walls, thinking about a stranger who had walked into my life for 5 minutes and turned everything upside down. The next morning, I called my friend David, who's a psychologist. I didn't tell him everything, just asked him hypothetically about unexpected encounters and what they might mean. He talked about how our brains try to find patterns and meaning in everything, how we're wired for narrative. But this didn't feel like my brain making up a story. This felt real, significant, like I'd witnessed something important even if I didn't understand it yet. I went back to the gallery the next day and searched everywhere. I checked the desk, the floor, the corners. I was looking for anything she might have left behind. A note, a business card, a clue, nothing. It was like she'd been a ghost, but she wasn't a ghost. She was real. I could still feel where she'd been standing. I could still smell traces of her perfume in the air, or maybe I was imagining it. Either way, she'd been there. She'd chosen me for something, and now I had to figure out what. I started paying more attention to everyone who came into the gallery over the next few days. Was she watching? Would she come back? Every time the door chimed, my heart jumped. But it was always just regular visitors looking at art, asking questions, moving on with their lives. 3 days passed. Then 4. I was starting to think I'd never understand, that this was just going to be one of those strange life experiences you carry with you forever without explanation. But then, on the 5th day, while I was going through new exhibition submissions, I found it, an envelope, plain white, no name on it. But I knew immediately it was from her. I don't know how I knew. I just did. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat cursive, and several photographs. I sat down at the desk and started reading, and with every sentence the mystery began to unfold. The letter started simply, "Dear friend, I owe you an explanation." I read those words 3 times before continuing. Friend. She called me friend, even though we'd never spoken, even though I didn't know her name. There was something both strange and comforting about that. "My name is Diana," the letter continued, "and what I did to you the other night was the most important thing I've ever done in my life. Diana." Finally, a name to attach to the face I couldn't stop thinking about. I kept reading, and with each paragraph I felt my understanding of that night shift and reshape itself like sand underwater. She explained that she was an artist. A performance artist, specifically. For the past 15 years, she'd been creating work about boundaries, consent, and the invisible walls we build between ourselves and other people. Her art was controversial. Some people loved it. Others thought she went too far. But Diana didn't care about being liked. She cared about being honest. 8 months ago, she'd received news that changed everything. Cancer, aggressive, terminal. The doctors gave her a year, maybe less. Most people, she wrote, would retreat when facing something like that. They'd spend time with family, cross things off bucket lists, maybe travel to places they'd always wanted to see. But Diana wasn't most people. Instead of stepping back, she decided to create her most important work yet. She called it her final project, though she didn't give it a specific name in the letter. The concept was simple but profound. She would choose 5 strangers and create a moment of pure, unspoken vulnerability with each of them. No words, no explanations beforehand, just truth, shared silently between 2 human beings. "I've been coming to your gallery for weeks," she wrote. "I sat in the corner and watched you talk to visitors. I saw how patient you were with the elderly couple who couldn't understand the modern art. I noticed how you stayed late every Thursday to work on the exhibition. I watched you sit with that painting of the woman crying, just staring at it for 20 minutes like you were trying to understand her pain." Reading this made my skin prickle. She'd been there watching me and I'd never noticed. How many times had I walked past her? How many times had we been in the same room? "I chose you," Diana continued, "because you see people. Really see them. Not many people do that anymore. Most of us walk through life half blind. so caught up in our own thoughts that we never truly witness each other. But you're different. I could tell, and I needed someone who would understand what I was offering, even if it took time for that understanding to come. She went on to explain her thinking. In our world, she wrote, we've created so many rules about bodies, about touch, about intimacy. Most of those rules are good and necessary. They protect us. They give us control over our own boundaries. But somewhere along the way, we've lost something too. We've lost the ability to simply be human with each other, vulnerable, honest, present. When you're dying, Diana wrote, and I could feel the weight of that word on the page. You realize how much time you've wasted hiding. Hiding your body because it's not perfect. Hiding your feelings because they might be too much. Hiding your real self because it might not be acceptable. I don't have time for hiding anymore. So I decided to create moments where hiding was impossible, for both me and the person I chose. The letter explained that I was the fourth person. Before me, there had been 3 others. A nurse who'd been kind during her chemotherapy treatments, a bus driver who always greeted passengers with genuine warmth, even during early morning routes when most people were grumpy, a librarian who recommended books without judgment, who seemed to understand that sometimes people need stories to help them escape their own. Each encounter had been documented in her private journals. She'd observed each person carefully before approaching them. She'd thought about what she wanted to communicate, and then she'd acted, creating these brief, intense moments of human connection that existed outside normal social rules. I know what I did might seem wrong to you, Diana wrote. You might feel like I violated your space, your consent, your sense of safety. If that's how you feel, I understand, and I'm truly sorry. That was never my intention. My intention was to offer you a gift. The gift of seeing another human being in complete truth and being seen in return. No performance, no masks. Just one person saying to another, this is me, all of me, and I trust you with it. She talked about consent in a way that made me think harder than I'd ever thought about it before. Consent is complicated, she wrote. Yes, I didn't ask permission, but I also didn't take anything from you. I offered something. My vulnerability, my trust, my humanity. You could have looked away. You could have asked me to leave. You didn't. You stood there and witnessed me. You saw me. That was your choice, and I'm grateful for it. The letter went on for several pages. Diana wrote about her life, her art, her diagnosis. She wrote about the other people she'd chosen and how each encounter had affected her. She wrote about death and how strange it is that we spend our whole lives avoiding the thought of it, even though it's the one thing we all have in common. I've learned something these past months, she wrote near the end. When you strip away all the noise, all the social expectations, all the fear, what's left is just humans needing other humans. Connection. Witness. The simple act of being seen and saying silently to each other, I'm here. You're here, we're alive, and isn't that extraordinary? But here's the part that hit me hardest. Diana wrote that my reaction had been different from the others. She'd been watching through the window after she left. She saw me stand there frozen. She saw tears form in my eyes. She heard me whisper thank you even though she'd already walked away. You understood, she wrote. Maybe not consciously, not in that moment, but somewhere deeper you got it. You felt what I was trying to communicate. That's rare. That's precious. That's why I'm writing to you now instead of just letting the moment stand on its own. At the bottom of the letter was an address and a date, her studio, the following Saturday at 2 p.m. If you want to talk, she wrote. If you want to understand more, if you want to share how this affected you, I'd like that. No pressure. No expectations. Just 2 people having a conversation. The choice is yours. I set the letter down and realized my hands were shaking again. Not from shock this time, but from something else. Recognition, maybe, or relief, because now it made sense. Not complete sense. How could something like this ever completely make sense? But enough sense. Enough to let me breathe a little easier. The photographs that came with the letter showed Diana's previous work. Performance pieces where she'd pushed boundaries and asked difficult questions. In one series, she'd stood in public spaces with signs asking strangers to share their biggest secret. In another, she'd created a room where people could go to scream without judgment. Her art was always about truth, about breaking down the walls we hide behind. I spent the rest of that day thinking about whether I'd go to her studio. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, to go back to my normal life where strange women didn't walk into galleries and create moments that defied explanation. But another part of me, a bigger part, knew I had to go. I needed to understand more. I needed to talk to this person who had seen something in me that I didn't quite see in myself. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to decide who I wanted to be, the person who played it safe, or the person who was brave enough to follow this thread wherever it led.